Hey, checking in with 14 and 15 of the Awkward Black Man by Walter Mosley collection of short stories. So 14 is Local Hero, and 15 is Otis. And so in in Local Hero, our protagonist has a cousin who's great, who's like is smart and is a kind of a ladies' man, but also kind of really gets into trouble and danger and stuff like that. And kind of gets sucked into his world. Um, but he dies, and they grow up together, and he dies as a young man, having gotten in. He beat up a guy for beating up a girl. That guy got a couple of his friends, and they just beat him to death. And he kind of slowly, over the course of the story, just assumes his identity. They always looked alike, and his mother gave him his wallet, and the police mistook him for him. Um, when he takes the gun away from a mugger, and they catch him with him basically pointing the gun at the mugger, and he's got this guy's voice in his head, and he just sort of slowly kind of assumes his personality, assumes his demeanor and stuff like that. Is going back to school, and is going back to school as the guy, local hero. The next story, Otis, is about Percival Crash. Well, he's basically called Crash throughout the story. His parents, I think they died in a crash. And he seems to be mildly autistic. He just thinks differently. He looks at math problems. He can just do them instantly. He doesn't show the work. He knows all the answers already. He doesn't know his teachers, as someone says, and thus his teachers do not like him. He punches a math teacher for continually ragging on him to make him show the work. He gets transferred out of that into a kind of a prep school, kind of like much higher level school. But after a couple of blissful years, he's like, he gets bored, and he decides to do an experiment. It's like, if I show all my fellow students all the answers, the questions and the answers, will they learn better? Because the school seems to want to keep things secret from them. What happens if we just show it to them? But then he has a dream one night. It's like, oh, it's not so much a dream as just a realization, like, oh, one of my fellow students will turn me in at some point. It's inevitable. And indeed, that day he gets called to the office, and he goes, oh, fuck. That's what's going to happen. And it's like, he could go to the student advocate, go to the principal, or he could just leave. And he just leaves. And he goes into the woods, camps in the woods. Like, he gets everything set up, and he goes camps in the woods. And this guy comes out of the woods, Otis, titular character. And they introduces him to him. And he's like an older guy, and he stabbed a guy because he got in a fight with him. And he kisses him. And it's like, is there room in your tent for me? And Crash, who's very literal-minded, didn't mind the kiss, says, no, it's too small. Okay, well, I guess I'll sleep outside here. And then he gets woken up by park rangers the next day. Says, like, where's your ID and all that stuff. It's like, oh, it's in my backpack by the side of the tent. But Otis is gone, and so is his backpack, and all the stuff, including the sweater that he lent the guy. And he goes home, and it turns out, no, they were just calling him to the office to be a valedictorian. Parents say, like, don't cheat. Do not cheat. His mother leaves them for this guy she'd been kind of tending to, who had kind of cancer. They kind of grow up. he's planning on maybe becoming a professor, that kind of a thing. He decides to track down Otis, but he finds that he's just a little too late. Otis is dead. And yeah, he'd gotten into a fight. He talks to his mother, and it's like, oh, Otis like always talked about you. Said like he was the only you were the only person who like treated him like a human being that understood him. And Crash says like, yeah, well, it's because we both had I have a different, my brain is different. And it's like not like I have a disease or infirmity. It's just like my brain is different, and I think Otis's brain was different too. And that's why we could understand each other. We could really understand each other that way. And indeed, Otis is lying in that coffin, wearing this very same sweater that he had given him all that time ago. And it's kind of a sad, bittersweet, sweet story that way. So yes, that's the 2 stories of Awkward Black Man. Definitely Otis helped me a little bit here because that felt like a little bit more heartfelt of a story. Some of the other stories are getting a little like, it's a bit of a grind to get through them. Not grind, but I'm going through this slowly. It's the whole thing with a short story collection. It's like you have to pause, think about. Whereas if you get a whole novel, it's like one large story, and you get further deeper in, and you get to think about within these characters. And the short stories can be a little bit more trying that way. At least that's what I'm finding with Walter Mosley in this one. I've enjoyed his collections where it's like it's all one character. Like, man, if it could only be Crash through a whole bunch of stories, that would be pretty awesome. Because I think I actually like Crash, which is interesting because Crash is maybe a little bit less full than some of the other characters. Not full. He's less neurotypical than a lot of the other characters that have been in this book, who, while awkward, have been. I mean, Crash in some ways is the least awkward of the characters, which is interesting. I think I will leave it there. All right, more videos later.